Do you remember the browser Arc? I was originally skeptical and then became a huge fan, and then watched the browser company, the creators of this browser, just slowly let it fall apart, eventually pivoting to do some cringe AI stuff. I have been frustrated about this for a very long time. I have a ton of videos about the chaotic journey that Arc has taken from a thing I wasn't sure about to a thing I loved to a company that I now kind of detest. Well, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that this will be my last video about Arc almost certainly. The bad news is the reason why. The browser company has been acquired by Atlassian. I don't know how much you guys know about my takes on Atlassian, but I have like two strong takes about software in general. One is that you should use things by people who actually use the things they build. And take two is that you should keep everything related to Atlassian as far away from your tech as possible. My first ever YouTube controversy was me going too hard on Atlassian stuff. And then, as usual with Atlassian, I turned out to be right. If you're not familiar with Atlassian already, they're the company that makes Jira, the issue tracker that's so bad that like hundreds of companies have spawned to try and make it better and compete with it directly. Atlassian is quite the company, and I have a lot of thoughts about what happened here. I've spent pretty much the entire day researching to get every detail I can about this, as well as the history of Atlassian and Browser Company and how they're intertwined, with the goal of answering these three core questions. Why do they need to sell? Why would Atlassian buy? And what's next for the browser company? These are all really good questions that I'm excited to answer, but unlike the browser company, I didn't just get bought for $610 million pre-revenue. We got bills to pay. I have to figure out how to get this covered. So quick break for today's sponsor, and then we'll dive into all the details of this absolutely chaotic acquisition. I know you guys love browsers, and that's why I took one as a sponsor. No, don't leave. I'm not talking about Opera, I promise. I'm talking about BrowserBase. What is BrowserBase? Well, it's a browser for your AI and your servers. What the hell do they mean by a web browser for your AI? They mean that they figured out the puppeteer problem. If you've ever had to spin up a browser in the cloud, you know how miserable it is, especially for serverless. And now it's more useful than ever to have. If you want your AI agent to be able to crawl different websites and actually interact with them, you can't just call that via curl. You need to run an actual browser instance. And that's what BrowserBase is for. They're an infinitely scalable cloud that will run as many or as few browsers as you need at any given time in order to interact with the web via agents, including the official computer use agent from OpenAI, as well as the equivalents from every other major provider. One of my favorite parts of the BrowserBase ecosystem is Stagehand. It's an SDK that you can call with a URL to make it go there, as well as plain language for the things that you want, like the price of the first cookie, or actions, like add it to the cart. You could even pass it a Zod schema telling it what format you want the data back in, which is so useful. You might notice that this page looks different. That's because Stagehand is open source on GitHub and MIT licensed, so you don't even need to be using BrowserBase if you want to give it a shot. That said, if you want to ship this in production, one of the easiest ways to actually call Puppeteer with Stagehand is going to be BrowserBase, so you should probably use it with them. But feel free to try it with something else if you like. Don't restrict your AI apps by making them work exclusively with JSON. Extend their capabilities and let them use the web. Check out BrowserBase today at soydev.link/browserbase. Let's break this one down. But before I forget, if you're wondering what happened to my hand, got in a fight with a Firefox user. If you think this is bad, you should see him. Anyways, Browser Company is now owned by Atlassian. Why? Well, we need to break down the financial chaos that is the Browser Company first and foremost. I want you to think for a sec about how many employees you think the Browser Company has. They're a company that's building a Chrome fork. You might think I'm using it right now. I'm not. I'm using Zen. It's a Firefox-based alternative that's very similar to Arc, but unlike Arc, is built by a very small number of people that actually care about their users. Arc, I swear, they look down on their users. And this is Arc. It's like Chrome, but with a sidebar and a handful of cool features like their profile stuff. It was a really useful browser. It just slowly got buggier and buggier and eventually also got really battery heavy and just slowly falling apart with no updates. How many people do you think it takes to build this? There's a good chance you're thinking a high number because I'm leading up to this. Like, God, how big could they possibly go? Like 30 people? That'd be insane. You're right. It is 30 people. You just forgot the one in front. They have over 130 employees, and they're based out of New York City. Mind you, not every one of these employees is an engineer, so we shouldn't expect all of them to be making a ton of cash. But if you're living in New York, it's fair to guess the average money spent per employee is probably around $100,000 minimum. You know what? I'm going to bump it. I'm going to bump it to 120 because it's probably 100K salary and then benefits and everything else. The average employee probably costs around 120K. And I've recently learned it's not even 130 employees anymore. It's 140 plus. So we're going to go with 140 employees at $120,000 a year. They are spending on salaries alone probably around $17 million per year, just paying employees and getting them benefits. This is possibly even a low estimate. Do you understand how insane that is for a company that is, again, pre-revenue? They only somewhat recently started charging for subscriptions in Dia, and it was for a very small number of the users, and it was a very small amount of money. Arc never charged. Arc never made money. I talked to a lot of different AI assistants trying to figure out as much info as I could, and they all hallucinated revenue numbers for Browser Company, and all of them were wrong because the Browser Company is pre-revenue still. So they're burning 17 mil on engineers alone. When you consider all the marketing spend, the contractors they probably bring in for their fancy ass videos and shit, probably closer to the 20 mil range. That's insane burn for a company that is not making money yet, especially because the product that was succeeding, which was Arc, supposedly had grown 4x between 2023 and 2024, has been almost entirely abandoned by the Browser Company. It's also important to understand their history of fundraising. I've been trying to use my $200 ChatGPT subscription more, and it has me more and more skeptical of ChatGPT as a business. It's a bit of a shit show, but when it comes to doing this like big, deep research stuff, finding like a history of a company like this, it can be useful. It's better than paying for yet another subscription to another service to collect all this. So in July of 2020, they did their seed round. Also, Jason Warner is an old friend. Cool to know that he was in. I should probably hit him up for more information, but I haven't done that. I've gotten no private information about this. This is all just combing through what public records I could find, and I've found some really fun stuff throughout. 2020, they did their seed, guessing a couple mil on a 20 to 40 mil val. Mid-2021, they did their Series A, which they raised $13 million during. There was no lead in this investment, and there's also no known valuation for this investment. But I'm guessing it was a 10%-ish dilution, so it's probably around 130 mil is what they were worth in 2021. So 2020, I would guess they were worth around 20 mil. Could have been a lot more. Probably not a lot more, though. Like the most it could possibly have been would have been 40, but I'm guessing 20. It might have been as low as 10. We'll go with that for now, though, because 20 mil is a reasonable seed valuation for a known person raising money pre-product. 20 mil cap is reasonable if you know what the fuck you're doing or you go through something like YC. 2021, again, if we assume a 10% dilution, it's probably around 130 million valuation. And then in January 2023, they closed a major round raising $56.8 million. It's effectively a Series B, even though they didn't call it that. It wasn't priced equity, though, so there was no new valuation that was disclosed. An important note here, though, is that during this 2023 raise, Atlassian Ventures threw some money in. Very interesting, because Atlassian Ventures normally doesn't do consumer stuff. They're much more focused on enterprise-y things, like compliance platforms and shit like that. So was surprised to see them here. Also makes sense longer term why they would continue to be involved. So again, if we're assuming that 10% dilution, which is just a guess, it could be as high as 20, could be as low as 5, but it's probably around 10%, 56.8 million raised. That'll put them at around 550 million is what they're worth. And remember, still pre-revenue. They've not made a single dollar at this point. Their value just keeps going up, despite the fact that they don't make any money. But then in 2024, they raised one last round. And in March of 2024, they did another 50 mil of cash. This was the official Series C. This was effectively the Series C. Again, they didn't call them these things properly. This was led largely by Pace Capital. This was likely around a 550 mil post-money valuation. So what we'll say here is that the valuation probably didn't change much, if at all, between 2023 and 2024. So still 550 million. But in total, they raised $128 million. 128 million total raised. Their burn is around 20 million a year. That would give them 6 years of total based on the 4 years of raising. Mind you, their costs were lower earlier on, but also the amount of money they had in the bank was lower, and they took 10% plus dilution each of these times. My guesses with the current state of the company are that they probably have around 2 years max runway because they had all of this money. They almost certainly spent it. Once you have 100 mil in the bank, you fucking spend it. That's what you do with the money. So they're probably down to 2 years maximum runway. Josh loves hiring. He talks about it in almost every single thing that they do. So there's a good chance that he wanted to hire more and probably wanted to raise more money so that he could justify hiring more. So 2 years max runway. Josh and co-founder are probably diluted to like 40 to 60%. So I'm guessing that they're left with around 40% of company after all of the chaos of this fundraising. But the most important thing, by far, the early Dia numbers for their new browser that's meant to replace Arc are almost certainly hot fucking garbage. Why would I think that? Well, let's look again here. They had a 20 mil val, then 130 mil, then 550, probably twice. Their valuation stopped going up as time went on. If they were to raise again, they would have to take even more dilution and possibly go to a lower valuation, because for all of these raises, they had growth to show. They even show it in this particular chart in this video where they talk about why they're leaving behind Arc. They supposedly, through 2024, 4x'd their user accounts. Supposedly. I honestly believe it. I saw a lot more attention on Arc throughout 2024 than I did in 2023. And I think that this first spike here is when I published my video, yet Josh still gives me endless fucking shit for no reason. Yeah. This is where we're going to get into one of the first major tangents. The browser company looks down on their users. This should sound kind of insane because it kind of is. The browser company is a company that is building a power user tool. A browser with fancy features like sidebars, managing workspaces, all the cool peaks and shit that they built is not a tool for normies. It's a tool for power users. The people who use the web the most and want to change their experience of the web the most are, by definition, power users. But they did not like that. It is very, very clear that Josh was not a fan of the fact that their product was used primarily by power users. The way he put it is that he built something his mom would never use. I'll let him say his piece here because I think it's extra funny in retrospect. By the way, if this gets cut or sounds weird, blame the fact that they always use copywritten music for everything, so I can never actually react to it. It's obnoxious.
I got near and dear friends in my life, family members that I just couldn't get to use Arc. And these are people with a bajillion tabs open. They should love the thing we've built, but it was just too complicated for them. It was intimidating. And we started this company in order to build something for the people that we love. We didn't start this company for the sake of a sidebar and spaces and pin tabs. And while we've quadrupled the number of people that use Arc every day this year, if you extrapolate that out, we're not going to get to 1 billion people using this product. But on the other hand, sidebar and spaces and pin tabs, that's what makes Arc so great. I even ran.
You get the idea. They thought the tool was too complex for normal people, and they even tried running polls where they would see what features they would be able to cut, and since they only had 3 features, people didn't want to cut any of them. Vertical tabs, favorites, and space, like those aren't even big features. There's no reason to consider cutting any of them other than the fact that you don't like the current user base of people who like all these features and you want a different user base, a different ideal, a normal person. There's a talk that I reference a lot from YC specifically for this slide, the idea of how to sell a new product. You start by targeting this left section on the normal curve, the innovators, people who are the most willing to try new things. If you're a developer, which most of my audience is, you know which devs on your team and at your company are the most interested in trying out new solutions and technologies, and you know which devs will try it 5 years after it was in vogue. This curve is a way to think about those people. The average person is somewhere in the middle here where they'll try it a little earlier than normal or a little later than normal. Most people are not innovators. They're not trying out new shit right when it drops. Largely because it's not very beneficial to be one of those people. If you're an innovator, you're some amount getting in too early, trying things before they're necessarily great and wasting time. I'm lucky I found a way to do this and make money with it with my YouTube channel because I just love trying out new shit. It's who I am as a person. So you need to win that audience initially in order to get them to like your thing, to then share it with other people down the curve. That's how you find success. You win the innovators, you make the features the early adopters need to gain interest, you help the innovators shill this to those early adopters, and slowly you take over the entire curve. That is how you win. The problem is that the innovators in the space of trying new browsers are not the types of people that like and are cool with Chrome as it stands today. It seems like the goal of Browser Company was to take this curve, skip the entire left side, and go straight over to the right side where the late majority and laggards all are. It seems very clear that they thought they'd have some magic way to just skip over the section here entirely, just ignore it, and immediately jump over to the late majority and laggards side, people who haven't changed the software they're using in decades. There's no world in which you can just skip those steps and get there, but the Browser Company was so annoyed by the people on this left side here that they decided that it would be easier to just stop supporting them entirely. Oh, you have Arc. Arc is fine. And then build something for the people over here that will never try anything else in the first place. It was doomed from the start. And if these earlier investors were interested because they saw the growth curve, you know, the one that he just showed here, Like if I saw this growth curve and I was considering investing in the company, I'd write them a check so fast because this is a good growth curve. The fact that they picked up pace so aggressively in a year is a huge deal. And if you look at how they raised their last 50 mil, it came from Pace Capital because they were so invested in the Arc browser's vision, specifically in Arc itself. Also very funny that the lead investor from that firm specifically called out that browser company ships every week, constantly pushing the boundaries of product innovation, right before they announced they would no longer be working on Arc. So the investors bought into the growth and into Arc specifically. Browser company was hating these users more and more, and also, most importantly, realizing they can't monetize and make the money they need to make on such a small portion of the market. The people on this left side here, the innovators, are also some of the least willing to spend money on new things. That's the weird contradiction of this chart. The people who are the most willing to try new things also are the least willing to spend money on them because they'll just go try another new free thing instead. And the reason half of this shit happens is because these people are much more willing to try a thing if it doesn't cost money. And as soon as you start charging them, they churn. Browser company knows that. And they would try to find things to charge these people for, and they would just never, ever use them. So they tried building things that they could eventually charge them for, and they still wouldn't even use those. Like all the fancy AI features they tried building for the people on this side, they just didn't use them. So they built a whole new boring browser from scratch that looks and feels a lot more like Chrome in hopes they could go downstream and target these late majority and laggard people instead. And I can tell you that didn't go well. Not because they've admitted that it didn't go well, but because in their own coverage of this browser, you can tell that it didn't go well. Let me find here. When they looked at the stats for Arc, only 5.5% of the daily users would use more than one space. Only 4.1% would use live folders, and only 0.4% would use calendar preview on hover. That is hilarious. These features also, specifically live folders and the calendar preview, those were garbage. Spaces were kind of cool, but most days I only needed to use one space. So if you're measuring it that way, that makes sense. Even then, 5.5% of people using a feature that's that different is pretty cool. But that said, this is the number they share for Dia. Chatting with tabs and personalized features are used by 40% and 37% of daily users respectively. 5% of 10 million users is much more impressive than 40% of 100 users. They wouldn't be talking in percentages if Dia was doing well. If you have a much smaller number of users, those users are much more likely to be there for the unique things. Obviously, they're going to use those features. And even then, Dia users, only 40% of them are chatting with tabs. 60% of people installing Chrome, but for chat with tabs, aren't using the chat with tabs feature. That is a death nail. Even if the number of users was good, this is a bad signal, but the number of users is almost certainly bad. Where does this leave us? Browser company had a large number of users in this early adopter area that weren't willing to spend money and weren't really monetizable in general. So they tried building a thing for people on the other side of this, realized that almost none of them are willing to try new things, and even the ones that they could get aren't using the features that they added to the browser 60% or more of the time. And then they tried something else recently. They finally monetized. They actually added memberships to Dia. And I don't know a single person paying for one. Not a single fucking person. And I have a lot of people telling me all about the different browsers that they are using. I know a dozen people who are paying for the Perplexity browser. I do not know a single person that's ever paid $1 to the fellows over at Browser Company. Not one. And I literally had 5 people in my apartment yesterday using Arc still. Nobody I know is paying for Dia because I don't think anyone is paying for Dia. That was a last-ditch effort to see if they could ever make money. And guess what? It also failed hard. So now let's go to the mind of Josh. He's able to raise based on the growth they were showing. He killed that. He could potentially make money off of charging users, not going to work at all. But he still wants to hire more people. He still needs to pay salaries, and he's got at best 2 years of runway. What do you do next? Your only option left is acquisition. But who would buy the browser company? This is where things start to get really interesting. First, we have to ask, what does the browser company have that's actually valuable? Well, they have expertise on reverse engineering Chromium and building a Swift UI interface for it. They are apparently pretty good at porting Swift UI stuff to Windows, even though it barely works. The fact that it works at all is kind of miraculous. Even Apple gave up. And when they're building for Windows, they use Svelte and Chromium like Electron. Hilarious. So, yeah. The harsh reality is that Arc isn't very valuable. I know we like to think that these types of businesses are valuable because we see everyone using them. The browser's so important. But what are people willing to pay for their browser? Not much, because there are so many good free options. And now there's great free and open source options, like the browser I'm using now, Zen, which is a Firefox-based alternative to Arc. And I also dearly love Helium, which is a different team working on a much more minimal Chromium set of mods that just makes Chrome more pleasant to use, less tracking, more minimal top nav, just a lot of little things that make Chrome nicer. And I've been very happy with that as well. Those are the two browsers I use today. So Arc isn't very valuable. So what's left? We got Dia. We got a lot of design-focused enges. And I guess Rand, a New York office. Not too much that's valuable. You also have a ton of expenses. You have at least 20 mil a year of expense and zero revenue. So what the fuck are you buying here? Okay, one last piece before we get there. I really want to dive in on this Arc isn't very valuable piece. I thought I was going to go into this later, but I think it's better to just do it now. Power user tools don't make much money. I hate this fact. It kills me. I have been down this myself with my own products, like Ping. Specifically, the Ping.gg video call product that was meant to be like Zoom for streamers, make it easier to do live content collaborations, used by everybody from Linus Tech Tips to Elgato to Primeagen to game shows like Austin Show. We made the best power tool for doing live collaborative content and made like at best $8K a month off of it. And the infra costs alone were $4 to $5. Despite winning the market, there was almost no money in it. It's one of the many reasons we started pivoting out to dev tools and then eventually made T3 Chat, which went way better than expected. The power user tool got us into the market very quickly, but we saturated that side of the market, and getting over the line just didn't make sense in the creator space at all, because anybody who's not one of the like innovators really pushing their tech to the limits probably isn't that successful. And yeah, it was just chaos. So sure, Theo, that's your experience. What about real businesses though? You love power user tools. Like, let's look at the ones I use every day. Let's go through my talk here. And that's all the Apple garbage. Final Cut Pro, which sells an estimated 100,000 copies a year max. Yes, the best video editing software ever made that you buy once has been sold maybe 100K times a year. That's hilariously low. What else do we got in here that's a power user tool? Most of these aren't really things trying to make a lot of money. 1Password's not a power user tool. They had to go hard on enterprise to win and make any money at all. Okay, here's the one I wanted to talk about. Superhuman. Superhuman is a better email client for Gmail that costs $15 to $30 a month. I forgot what it currently costs. The price has changed a little bit throughout, but it is more expensive than the G Suite subscription to have a better client for your G Suite subscription in just the email side, nothing else. Sounds insane, but Superhuman was so good that we kind of just dealt with it anyways. If you spend your life in email, Superhuman is a godsend. Because of that, a lot of people in the Valley, in the tech space, you know, like your average founder, CEO, investor, and whatnot, all of us made the move to Superhuman. As such, it felt like Superhuman was already winning. When almost everybody you talked to was using Superhuman, and these are like the richest people in the world to an extent, and some of the most likely to succeed people too, it seems like they're just obviously going to win. And then AI happens, it's like, oh, they can build the AI email client that Gmail doesn't know how to do. So much opportunity for success, right? They also were able to raise at increasingly absurd valuations. I think they were over a bill val at some point. But that couldn't be sustained because their growth just wasn't good enough, and their cost to acquire customers was absurd. They would spend so much money per customer. For the first 3 to 4 years of Superhuman, you couldn't even just sign up and start using it. You had to schedule an onboarding session where they had a human join a Zoom call with you to teach you how to use it. That's just not sustainable. And they kind of seemed to get that at least, but also had raised so much money at such high valuations that they were going to run out really fast and not have the ability to raise more. So what happened to Superhuman? Superhuman got acquired by Grammarly. Yes, the Chrome extension that corrects your bad typing in random apps is what acquired Superhuman, the best email app ever made. We don't know how many users Superhuman has. I'd be surprised if it was over 1 mil, but Grammarly has over 40 million users. Their assistant helps write over 50 million emails every week. Grammarly is also not a very good power user tool. Seems like the goal here was to get people who deeply understand email integrations and specifically Gmail and pull them in to make Grammarly better at doing email stuff. Makes sense. I don't know how much money this acquisition was, but I can't imagine it was a whole lot just due to the nature of the chaos there. Looks like their revenue was known. It was $35 million a year. I know a lot of revenue numbers from a lot of companies, and that is a bit embarrassing. I think Cursor just broke 300 mil a year, was it? So yeah, Cursor makes 10 times more money than the email app that everybody who works at Cursor uses. Yeah. Meanwhile, Grammarly's at over 700 million a year. Makes a lot of sense. And being that Superhuman was raising at an 825 mil val in 2021, there was no world in which they could keep raising at higher valuations, considering the fact that their revenue was 1/10 of a company like Cursor's. They just were fucked. Absolutely fucked. There was no world in which they could keep going. There was no world in which fighting for the power user would make them the money they needed to make to keep growing. So they gave up and they sold to Grammarly. So what does this have to do with what's going on here with Dia? I think Browser Company looked closely at Superhuman and realized that that path was a suicide mission. They wanted to make something that their moms could use. That was the goal with Dia. And they learned the harder truth that those people don't try new things. So their attempt to go from power users to consumer outright failed. They have this team of people in New York that are pretty good at design and UX work, know Chromium and know the web decently well, and are pretty AI-pilled. But they just cannot make money. No matter what they do, they cannot figure out a way to make actual cash to justify the increasingly high valuations they have. Do you know a company has none of those problems? Atlassian. These guys know how to make money. Atlassian makes $3 billion or more a year. I know this because they owned the building that Twitch operated out of. They owned the whole building and let us rent the bottom 7 floors. I had to share elevators with people who worked on Jira every single day for years. And I stayed civil, despite the fact that the Jira page would take upwards of 10 minutes to load for us. Yes, when I opened up my Jira dashboard, I would have to sit there and wait for 10 minutes before anything would come up. And then they made the update to the terms of service where you're not allowed to publish benchmarks for how slow things are. Oh, man. Oh, Atlassian. Don't get me started on React Beautiful drag and drop and the chaos there. I've been through it with Atlassian stuff. The really crazy thing with them is their ability to make money despite not being in first place for a lot of things. For example, software like Bitbucket, the definitive third place position holder for the Git wars. Yes, believe it or not, there's an alternative to GitHub that isn't GitLab that makes money. Bitbucket is Atlassian's GitHub, and it's awful, much like the rest of their product. It's not meant to be good. It's meant to have features that they can sell to enterprises. Atlassian is the spec sheet company that sells a set of things to a business that they can then go build crazy workflows around and then never be able to leave. Atlassian's capture for their dollars is insane. Once they have a dollar coming in a subscription, it never goes away unless the company goes out of business. Their ability to capture a user's spend and never let go of them is unmatched across the industry. That's why they make so much money. So Atlassian knows how to make money. That said, they suck at making good software. This is the exact inverse of the problem over at Arc and Dia with Browser Company. Browser Company knows how to make decent software, sometimes even good software, but they don't know for shit how to make money. In fact, they're about to go out of business if they don't do something like this because they can't afford to pay the wages for their employees. So how do we fix this? And to be frank, Atlassian doesn't interact with the types of companies that know how to build good software because they're too busy interacting with the IBMs of the world. They bought Trello that one time and then slowly let it die. Here's a friend who I don't necessarily want to dox in case they don't want to be in the video, who reached out with this archive link for how Trello got absolutely destroyed by Atlassian when they acquired it. It's like, oh, that looks kind of like beginner's version of Jira. We should acquire that and make sure that it works well with Jira. And then just slowly killed it, then did an overhaul they never should have that made it significantly worse. Atlassian sticks to its guns as customers slam software update. A disaster, an act of self-sabotage, the work of a sleep-deprived intern. These are some of the verdicts from Atlassian customers who have taken to online forums to vent their frustrations about the $52 billion software giant's update to Trello. This update is one of the worst in the past 5 years and possibly one of the worst in tech history. This needs an immediate fix, or we need the option to revert the update. Who approved this change? Stop listening to them. Did a sleep-deprived intern hit publish by accident? Everything takes more clicks now. Things that used to take 2 seconds now take 30 or more. So there's a lot of conspiracy here that Atlassian intentionally destroyed Trello to get people to move to Jira. I don't believe that for shit. Having been through it with Atlassian software, I can say pretty confidently that this is just incompetence. They just don't know how to build actual good software. And the current state of Jira is one where it will never be fixable. too many integrations exist on too many different systems. There is no world where Jira can possibly be good. So if Atlassian wants to try and make better software, but they don't interact with anybody who makes good software, where are they going to find people? Atlassian Ventures. Yes, the fact that they invested in 2023 meant that all of a sudden, they're now in touch with a company that's actually decent at software. And when you look at the list of companies that they've invested in otherwise, like Vanta, the compliance and trust company, an identity security company, Veza, Snyk, which is dev security, and Allstacks, which is an analytics company, you realize they don't really have anyone in their portfolio that's building good software for end users. They don't have that at all. So the closest connection Atlassian has to decent software is Browser Company. And the closest thing that Browser Company has to a connection to money is Atlassian. This is already starting to make more sense. But ready for my spiciest take yet? There is no more powerful browser user than a Jira power user. This might sound like the most insane thing I've said. In many ways it is, but hear me out. One of those important journeys I had in my history doing software development was the time I spent working on the internal safety tooling at Twitch. When you report someone on Twitch or report a piece of content, that gets sent to a platform that I helped build where admins, actual humans, comb through it and make decisions around those reports. That system was used by about 30 people at the time I was building it, and I've never gotten more detailed feedback about the thing I was building than I did with that small team. I was getting DMs every single day about every little change we made, what worked, what didn't, and how we could make the experience of them doing their jobs better for them. These are people who deeply understood every single detail of how their browser worked and interfaced with the websites that they go to. Not because they love using YouTube or Twitch so much, but because their job requires them to open hundreds of tabs on these investigations. It requires them to get through the UI of the product that they're doing the reviewing through at lightning speed because they're doing it literally hundreds of times a day, sometimes for 10 hours straight in the same browser session. I knew people who were on this team that were writing their own custom software with a Stream Deck. You know, the little screen keyboard thing that you can use to control streams like this? I knew people using this to make their job doing admin work at Twitch easier. I don't think you guys understand just how powerful that type of user is. And that's not just safety admin work. This is also customer support people. Some people doing support work at companies like Twitch use browsers in ways you cannot imagine right now as a developer. It's insane what I have seen. One of my friends who worked on support at Twitch would regularly have 3 monitors with more than 5 Chrome instances each, dozens of tabs each, with a crazy system using profiles and color coding to know which one had what, where, when, and why, as they were reviewing tickets for support questions at Twitch. Insane level of power use. And then you have program managers, people who manage things like Jira to make sure everyone is working on the right things, that the roadmap's moving in the right way, that will literally spend 6 to 8 hours a day in Jira. Those people are suffering in ways that I cannot properly put into words. If you want to hear an in-detailed rant about how bad software can be, find a program manager that works a lot in Jira and bring them out for a beer. You will hear things you cannot fathom. It's horrifying how bad it is. It's so bad that it can't be recovered. There is no world that Jira can be good in, but the most powerful of power users, the people in the browser that actually use the browser 8 to 10 hours a day and fight every feature to make it work the way they need to for their jobs, those people are stuck in Jira. Those people also benefited a lot from the types of features that Arc was focused on. Since Arc used resources terribly, it would lag out all the time and cause memory leakage and battery issues, so a lot of them didn't end up using it. But those kind of were the ideal demographic. These users also don't necessarily try out new things that often. They'll build new things for themselves. They'll use a tool that you hand them as the developer working at the company alongside them. But the likelihood that they go out and try a new browser is higher than an average person, but is not as high as us as developers. That said, these people will take literally anything you can give them to no longer have to fight Jira as much. Do you see where we are going with this? Let me play some of the stuff that Atlassian and Browser Company published today to see if it can click what's going on. Welcoming the Browser Company to Atlassian. By combining the Browser Company's passion for building browsers people love with Atlassian's deep expertise on how the world's best teams operate, we have the opportunity to transform how work gets done in the AI era. Once again, if this doesn't make it into the video, blame them for using music that will get us copyright struck. I don't make $3 billion a year, so I can't afford to fight these copyright laws. I have to make every cent we can off YouTube. Thank you to our sponsors, by the way.
Mike here. Today I want to tell you about a bold new chapter for Atlassian. We've entered into an agreement to acquire the browser company of New York, the team behind the incredible Arc and Dia browsers. Together, we're going to reimagine the browser for knowledge work in the AI era. This is a huge opportunity for both Atlassian and the browser company, and here's why.
Do you see where we're going? When he says knowledge work, he means people that work in these types of dashboards and tools a lot. People who spend as much time in Mode Analytics or in some private internal tool or Salesforce as they do in their email inbox. And if you ask any one of these people what the worst part of their life is, and they don't say Jira, they either forgot, and when you bring it up, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's what I should have said, or they don't use any Atlassian products. It's one or the other.
We have the potential to change the way 1 billion knowledge workers use AI to get work done in their browser. You see, there's a problem that every knowledge worker knows all too well.
This seems like it is fake. I promise you it is not. I have seen far too much in my time at Twitch, in my time at Amazon, to pretend that this isn't a reality. As painful as this is, this happens.
These tabs, they're not all recipe sites or newspapers or friends' feeds. Overwhelmingly, these tabs are SaaS applications and documents, because knowledge workers don't just use their browser to browse. They use their browser to work.
I know that quote got memed on by a couple people, but it's more real than you guys know. Even in dev, I find that the average person uses their browser much more for browsing than they do for actually getting work done. I remember when I first started talking about Zen more, people were pissed because it doesn't support Widevine, which is an encryption method that's used for doing DRM content for platforms like Netflix. I wouldn't know because I don't consume content on my computer. I use my phone for fun things. My computer is exclusively used for work and for making content like this. As such, I notice the differences between how I use browsers and how most people use browsers constantly. And it's a big part of why I have the weird takes that I have on browsers, because I don't use them for fun, I use them for work. And I was very upset when Arc announced they were going to move away from browsers for work and towards browsers for fun, because I don't use browsers that way. I use my phone for fun. And honestly, on my phone, I'm usually using apps anyways. And once again, if you think that you use the browser heavily, find some deep customer support person or a safety admin to watch for a couple hours doing their work. You have no idea. You have none at all.
Whether it's your email or calendar, whether you're managing projects, helping customers, balancing budgets, or designing your app, every single tab represents work getting done. But the challenge is your current browser wasn't designed to help you with any of it. It was designed in an era before SaaS and well before the current AI revolution.
Also, all bangers and true. The browser was designed to let JS interact with HTML on a web page. It was not built to do all the fancy things we now do in the browser. It can do them all really well, but the UX around it can't.
Joining forces with the browser company, we have an opportunity to change that. And in doing so, to change your workday. The browser company has built browsers that are beloved around the world. Firstly, with Arc, they reimagined doing work in a browser with SaaS apps. Then with Dia, they are reimagining how AI, chat, skills, and memory become a core part of the browsing experience. Combine that know-how with Atlassian and our 2 decades of understanding how teams and knowledge workers live and breathe. Together, we can transform how work gets done in the AI era.
It quickly devolves into cringe marketing, as all mediocre things do. But yeah. Unlike the post that came from Browser Company, this one actually describes pretty well why they would do this. For quick comparison, here's the video from the Browser Company. I don't trust them to use not copywritten sound, so I'm going to mute. You're not missing anything, though. This is it. Yes, they put a fake mouse cursor in there. They were so scared to do a real link here because that would punish your placement on Twitter that they did a fake one, and then, so annoying. So annoying. Especially because that's not even a real link, it's a redirect that goes to their Substack. Before that, though, I want to comment on Josh's post, the CEO of Browser Company, because unlike the Browser Company Twitter, he got an actual well-produced video about the move on his account. This one almost certainly is going to be DMCA struck, but on the off chance that we put this up and it doesn't, let's enjoy the cringe together.
2020, a small group of people bet their careers on something unfashionable, reinventing the web browser.
Our aspiration is for Arc to be the first popular internet computer.
Okay, I don't know if we can use this or not because of the music, but I love this slide. Windows, mobile, and enterprise security will now arrive sooner. This is the first thing that they've announced in the video, and we're 2/3 of the way in. This is all we know so far.
I'm just excited to be able to do all of the things.
Opening a new office in New York. We're going to hire 50 plus people in the next 12 months.
They're opening another office and they're hiring another 50 people. Josh is addicted to pretending to run a real company.
To invest in R&D and work on sort of what the future can look like.
We still play with new ideas and
We still play with new ideas in very similar ways. I don't want to go after somebody that isn't an exec. When you're an exec, you've made this decision. You've foregone your right to a public image that is free of tarnish. I hate going after an individual employee like this. So, Adina, I'm sorry for what I'm about to say. What the fuck is head of memberships at a company that doesn't sell memberships? What is your job? I genuinely don't know. Jesus Christ, this company's pre-revenue and you have somebody whose job is leading revenue when you don't have revenue. Oh my fucking God. If you wonder how they end up with 140 employees, here you go. They hire for roles that don't exist yet, for doing work that doesn't exist yet. Ew, fucking Christ.
All of these ideas for these custom models we can do with telemetry data. I listed these things to Mike and he's like, yeah, all of them.
Oh, look, we got a second idea, a second thing that can be built. He's numbering them on his hand like there were multiple, but there's only one thus far, which is security for enterprise and Windows support.
All of these ideas for these custom models we can do with telemetry data. I listed these
Custom models we can do with telemetry data. Instant cut.
things to Mike and he's like, yeah, all of them.
And then supposedly he listed these things. Thus far, the things are Windows support, enterprise security, which were already on the roadmap. They're accelerated now, and building custom models with their telemetry data. That's all has been said. Atlassian will bring Dia to the millions of people and teams who use their products today. What makes this way funnier is in this announcement post from Josh, he does not mention the word Atlassian a single time. You can tell that he's slightly ashamed. The work continues because when I stop at the coffee shop near our office, nobody's using Dia yet. If you did that in SF, they'd still be using Arc, motherfucker. Oh, God. So to be clear, Arc could never have made enough money to sustain the size of company he had built. It could have possibly been a decently successful 10 to 20 person company making a couple 100,000 to a couple million a year. That was an opportunity he killed long ago because he wanted to go big. He wanted to win the browser space, but he can't stop losing. I did a bit of hunting to see if Mike had ever talked about Arc before. Spoiler, he's never mentioned Arc once before this, but he did mention in 2017, proposal, a new browser. Glass. Every tab is a Chromeless panel. Favicon is the desktop icon. Each tab's a separate running program. So what if we just broke PWAs up and made them apps on your computer? This is the proposal for an operating system web hybrid, kind of like Chrome OS, kind of like PWAs, kind of like Chrome apps when that happened a while back. He clearly thinks about how we could make a better browser experience that doesn't feel as much like a crappy web browser. It's a thing he clearly cares about. So I think the reasons that this acquisition happened, as chaotic as they are, make a lot of sense in the end. Reason one is that browser company could never make money. Reason two, more importantly, browser company was almost out of money and they would not be able to raise again. So now browser company needs an exit. They need a way out because they cannot grow in the ways they have to pay the people they want to pay the amount of money they want to pay them. Also, they've taken a ton of dilution at this point and just don't really seem to be good at things like fundraising and managing a company. They want to focus on building and pretending to run a company and doing R&D on things that don't actually matter. They want to stay a experimental lab that has too many employees. They don't want to build real software. They've made that clear. They look down on their users. I honestly want to do a whole separate rant about the ways to look at your users. If you look up to your users, you're going to fail before you get across the fucking starting line. But if you look down on your users, you'll get really far before you burn yourself out and then fuck over said users. Someday I'll do a video on that. Point 3, Atlassian software is unusably bad. The only way Jira will survive in a world where companies can vibe code their own alternatives is if Jira doesn't have to be used for you to keep using Jira. If you can talk to your browser and say, hey, go solve this problem for me, or go find all the tickets related to this and move them to this chart, and it takes 4 minutes for the AI to do it, that's only like a minute longer than it takes it to do yourself in Jira because there's so many button clicks you have to do and every page load takes 2+ minutes. The fact that Jira is so slow and the API doesn't work means that a tool that can browse for you is more useful to Jira than almost anyone else in the world. And to top it all off, Atlassian CEO seems to think about browsers far too much, and on a deeper level than most do. That's probably why he invested in a browser company when everything else he invested in is like compliance and developer tooling. And it's also why this acquisition makes sense for him. I was secretly closely holding some hope that he was a power user and big fan of Arc, and that part of this was a baller move to try and save Arc from near certain death. I don't think it's that. I think he's just a nerd about browsers. He knows that Jira is absolutely fucked if they don't have better ways to use it. And most importantly, that making Jira better isn't possible. So instead of pretending they can make Jira better or that they can buy a Jira alternative and not fuck it up like they did with Trello, they're going to go a layer higher so that Jira sucking doesn't matter as much. It's almost like a hedge bet where they can try to make Jira better. They can try buying alternatives. But if everything else fails, at least they have this option that lets people keep paying for their Jira subs without ever actually touching Jira. It's a hedge. It's an attempt to make sure you can survive knowing that your software is garbage and will never be good. I am so thankful the saga is over, even if it ended in the funniest, dumbest possible way. I would never. When I saw people tweeting about this morning, I thought they were joking to troll me specifically. Yet here we are. Haven't released this video yet, but I did recently film one comparing all the current browsers that I would and wouldn't recommend and why. Very excited for this to come out. It's going to be chaotic, but it's fun. For my parting words, I leave you with two things. Thing one, donate to Zen Browser. These guys are actually trying to make a better browser, not a new browser from scratch for no reason. They just want to make it nicer to browse the web. They're a great small team. I already bought them a MacBook so they can make sure the Mac version works better, and I'm supporting them however I can. I've been part of the Patreon forever. I threw them some cash. Highly recommend supporting them. You can support them through Patreon or through Coffee directly. And then there's Imputnet, the people who are making Helium that also made Cobalt, the media downloader tool. These guys are great, and you can donate to them directly as well via Stripe, LibrePay, or even Coffee and whatnot as well through the Cobalt.tools website. These guys are working to make a better, more open internet, and they're doing a great job. My daily driver browser has been Helium for a bit now. It's just more reliable Chrome, which is kind of crazy. It's not as beautiful and nice and fancy features-wise as Zen, but these two browsers are great. And since neither of them are going to go raise hundreds of millions of dollars, hire 130 plus people and then fail. In fact, I'm pretty sure both of these projects are 2 people. Yeah. I already donated $1,000 to these guys and I plan to donate more in the future. I really, really need Helium to succeed. Both Zen and Helium are necessary parts of my life now. I can't imagine filming without Zen. I can't imagine doing dev work without Helium. Please support these browsers. I need them to survive. Links for both in the description. They deserve the money a lot more than the $610 million fucking dollars that Browser Company just got for not shipping for 2 years. Jesus Christ. I'm going to be mad about this one for a long time. I'm not going to lie. I hope this video was useful to somebody, or at the very least, you can commiserate with me about the slow, painful death of Arc. Go support some browsers that are better aligned with us as users. And until next time, peace, nerds.